He, a tech mogul, lived isolated in his luxury penthouse, cold and disillusioned after a family tragedy. She, a heartbroken young woman, pregnant and abandoned on the street, about to give birth in the middle of a thunderstorm. In an impulsive act of compassion, he rescues her and takes her to the hospital, where, to protect her, he introduces her as his wife. What begins as an innocent lie transforms into a complex yet moving charade that pulls him out of his solitude and puts him at the center of a life he swore he'd never have again. Watch this story to the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. Leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Moving on, the rain poured down on Chicago, turning the streets into turbulent rivers. Isabella "Izzy" Sanders clutched her thin jacket tighter around her body, protecting her 8-month belly as she walked aimlessly through downtown. Her feet ached inside her worn shoes, but she couldn't stop. She had nowhere to go. 3 days had passed since Richard had kicked her out of their apartment. "I can't handle this responsibility," were his last words, before slamming the door in her face, abandoning her and the baby she carried. 8 months of pregnancy, 8 months of broken promises, 8 months of lies about a future that would never exist. Izzy touched her belly, feeling a strong kick. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, trying to hold back tears. "Mommy will figure it out." But how? She had no family to turn to. Her parents had rejected her when they found out about the pregnancy, calling her the family shame. Her few friends distanced themselves when she needed help. The money she had saved working as a cashier was gone, spent on Richard's overdue rent. A sudden contraction made her double over in pain against a brick wall. It couldn't be. She still had 3 weeks to go. She took a deep breath, waiting for the pain to pass, but another contraction came, stronger this time. Panic. This was it. The baby was coming. 15 miles away, Gabe Montgomery adjusted the knot of his Tom Ford tie as his Rolls-Royce glided silently down Lakeshore Drive. At 38, he commanded a tech empire worth billions. But tonight, he felt the familiar weight of loneliness pressing on his chest. "Sir, are you sure you don't want me to accompany you to the event?" asked James, his driver and security for 10 years. "It won't be necessary." Gabe kept his gaze fixed on the city that stretched beyond the tinted window. "Afterward, take me straight home." The board meeting had been tense. His Aunt Eleanor had insisted again on his duty to marry Patricia Sterling, daughter of a major investor. "It's time for you to start a family, Gabriel. The company needs heirs," she repeated with that calculating smile he knew so well. Heirs. The word always tore him apart inside. He had already had a family: Marina, his wife, and little David, his 3-year-old son. A car accident had taken them 5 years ago, leaving Gabriel empty, consumed by a guilt that never left him. If he hadn't worked late that night, if he had picked them up as he promised. The phone rang, pulling him from his dark thoughts. Eleanor again. "I'm not going to answer," he muttered, rejecting the call. He needed air. He needed to get out of that suffocating world of demands and expectations. "James, change the route. Let's go through Wrigleyville." "Sir, in this rain?" "Through Wrigleyville," Gabriel repeated more firmly. Izzy could barely walk. The contractions were coming more and more frequently and intensely. She tried to hail a cab, but none were stopping in this storm. Her knees buckled and she leaned against a tree, feeling something warm run down her legs. "No, please no." A devastating contraction made her scream and fall to her knees on the sidewalk. The rainwater mixed with her tears as she felt the world spin. The baby was coming, right there, in the middle of the street with no one to help her. "Please," she begged the stormy sky, "don't let my baby die like this." Gabriel was lost in thought when James braked sharply. "What is it?" "Sir, there's a woman collapsed up ahead. Looks like she needs help." Gabriel looked up and saw through the windshield a figure hunched over in the rain. A woman, clearly pregnant, kneeling on the drenched sidewalk. Something in his chest clenched violently, a mixture of pain and recognition that he couldn't explain. "Stop the car." "Sir? Stop the car now!" Gabriel jumped out of the Rolls-Royce before James had completely stopped. The rain soaked him in seconds, but he ran to the woman. When he knelt beside her, he saw a young face contorted in pain, brown hair plastered to her face with tears and rain. "Please," she whispered, grabbing his arm with desperate strength. "My baby is coming." Gabriel felt as if time had stopped. Those brown eyes, full of terror and hope, instantly transported him back 5 years to another woman, another call for help that had come too late. This time he wouldn't be too late. "James!" he shouted over the storm. "Northwestern Memorial Hospital now." Gabriel carried Izzy to the car, feeling her body tremble against his. In the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, she doubled over in pain with each contraction, gripping his hand with a strength that surprised him. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep her conscious while James weaved through traffic towards the hospital. "Izzy," she groaned, breathless. "Izzy Sanders." "It's going to be okay, Izzy. I promise." She looked at him through the tears, studying that masculine face with striking features, the blue eyes that conveyed a steely determination. Why are you helping me?" Gabriel hesitated. How to explain that seeing a pregnant woman in danger had opened a wound he thought had healed? "Because it's the right thing to do." At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Izzy was rushed to the maternity ward while Gabriel remained in the reception area, his clothes still soaked, watching the activity through the glass. He couldn't leave. Something was holding him there. "Sir?" The nurse approached with a clipboard. "Are you the father of the child?" Gabriel opened his mouth to deny it, but the words didn't come out. For the first time in 5 years, someone had called him a father. The pain was instantaneous and devastating. She was alone. I found her in the street." "I understand. But someone needs to sign the documents and authorize the procedures. She's very weak, and the baby was born prematurely." Gabriel looked again at the door to the maternity ward. A young woman alone, abandoned, giving birth to a premature baby, just like Marina had been alone that fateful night, waiting for him. "I'll sign," he said, before he could rethink it. 3 hours later, Gabriel was still at the hospital when the doctor came to speak with him. "The baby is stable, but will need to stay in the NICU for a few weeks. The mother is recovering well, but is very emotionally shaken. Do you have private health insurance?" "Yes," Gabriel lied without hesitation. "Transfer everything to my account." When he was finally able to see Izzy, she was lying in a white bed, pale but awake. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "My baby. He's a strong little boy, but he needs special care for now." Tears of relief streamed down her face. "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me anything." Gabriel approached the bed, noticing how she looked even younger and more fragile under the hospital light. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," she admitted. "I have nowhere to go when I get out of here. I don't have the money to pay for the care he's going to need." Gabriel felt something clench in his chest. "What was your situation? The baby's father?" Izzy closed her eyes, the emotional pain replacing the physical one. "He abandoned me 3 days ago, said he didn't want the responsibility." Her voice broke. "I used to be a sales associate at a clothing store, but I was fired when my belly started to show. I have no family that will accept me. I was literally on the street when you found me." The story hit Gabriel like a punch to the gut. A young woman, alone, rejected by everyone. It was as if the universe was testing his ability to save someone, since he hadn't been able to save his own family. "Look," he said, his voice harsher than he intended. "You can't go back to the street with a premature baby. You need a safe place to recover." Izzy studied him with curiosity. "You're very kind, but I can't accept charity from a stranger." "It's not charity." Gabriel was surprised by his own words. "It's a practical solution." Before he could explain further, His phone rang. Eleanor. Again. "Excuse me," he muttered, answering the call in the hallway. "Gabriel, where are you? Patricia was expecting you for dinner. This is unacceptable." "I'm taking care of a situation." "What situation?" "You have responsibilities, nephew. The Sterling family is starting to question your commitment to the marriage." Gabriel looked through the half-open door at Izzy, who was attentively watching a nurse explain about the baby's care. Something in her expression, determination mixed with vulnerability, fascinated him in a way he couldn't explain. "Eleanor, I need to hang up." "Gabriel, don't you dare turn your back on me. You have an obligation." He hung up and returned to the room. Izzy looked at him expectantly. "Sorry, it was work." He sat in the chair next to the bed. "About your situation, I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Gabriel hesitated. What he was about to suggest was unthinkable, reckless. But looking at that woman, at the courage in her eyes, despite everything she had faced, he felt compelled to protect her. "My family is pressuring me to get married. They're controlling people who only care about appearances and business." He took a deep breath. "And you need stability to take care of your son." Izzy frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "An arrangement. You and the baby stay at my place until he's fully healthy and you get settled. In exchange, you help me fend off the pressure from my family about getting married." "You're suggesting a fake marriage?" Izzy couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I'm suggesting mutual protection." Izzy studied him in silence. There was something about that man that intrigued her, a deep pain behind the controlled facade, a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Gabriel looked away. "Because I know what it's like to be alone when you need someone most." Before Izzy could respond, the door opened, and an elegant, middle-aged woman stormed in like a hurricane, followed by James, who looked mortified. "Gabriel, what's this story about you disappearing, and who is this young lady?" Eleanor Montgomery examined Izzy from head to toe with critical eyes, immediately taking in the situation. Her eyes widened as she saw Gabriel sitting intimately close to the bed of a young woman who had obviously just given birth. "Aunt Eleanor." Gabriel stood up, his posture immediately becoming defensive. "How did you know I was here?" "James called me, worried about you." Eleanor continued to stare at Izzy. "So, are you going to explain what's going on?" Gabriel felt the weight of the moment. His aunt had found out about Izzy, which meant that soon the whole family would know. He looked at Izzy, who was watching him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, waiting for his response. The proposal he had made moments before had now become urgent. The lie he was about to tell would change everything. Gabriel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Eleanor awaited an explanation. Izzy looked at him expectantly, and he was about to plunge into a lie that would change everything. "Aunt Eleanor," he said with a firmness that surprised even himself, "may I introduce Isabella Sanders, my wife?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor paled, staggering slightly. Izzy's eyes widened, but something in Gabriel's expression made her remain silent. "You're what?" Eleanor whispered, clutching the edge of the bed. "We got married a few months ago, discreetly. Isabella was pregnant, and I wanted to protect her from media scrutiny until things settled down." Izzy watched, fascinated as Gabriel lied with a disturbing naturalness. There was something rehearsed in his posture, as if he were used to hiding truths. "Gabriel, this is impossible. You were engaged to Patricia. The contract—" "I was never engaged to Patricia, Eleanor. That was a fantasy of yours and her father's." Gabriel approached Izzy, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. The touch sent an electric current through her. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take care of my family." Eleanor left the room in a state of shock, muttering about scandals and broken contracts. When the door closed, Izzy and Gabriel were alone again. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because now you have no choice but to accept my help," he responded pragmatically, "and I have no choice but to protect you. The lie protects us both. 2 days later, Izzy found herself in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, heading towards Gabriel's mansion in Winnetka. The baby, who she had decided to name Michael, was stable, but still needed special care in the coming weeks. The house took her breath away. It was a modern 3-story structure with meticulously manicured gardens and a pool that looked more like it belonged to a resort. When Gabriel helped her out of the car, she noticed how his hands were firm but gentle. "This will be your room," he said, leading her to a suite on the 2nd floor. "It's next to the one I prepared for Michael." Izzy entered the room and stood frozen. It was bigger than the entire apartment she had lived in with Richard. A king-size bed dominated the room. There were reading chairs near a window overlooking the garden and a walk-in closet that seemed endless. "Gabriel, this is too much. You're my wife in the eyes of the world now," he said, but his voice carried a tension she couldn't decipher. "It needs to look like you belong here." During the following days, they established a strange routine. Gabriel left early for work and returned late, always asking about Michael and how she was adjusting. They had dinner together, polite conversations about neutral subjects, but Izzy noticed how he avoided talking about himself. It was Maria, the housekeeper, who began to reveal fragments of Gabriel's life. "It's good to see this house with life again," she said one afternoon, while helping Izzy organize the baby clothes that Gabriel had sent to be bought. "Ever since Mr. Montgomery lost his family, he's never been the same." Izzy stopped folding the little clothes. "Lost his family." Maria covered her mouth, realizing she had said too much. I shouldn't have mentioned it." "Maria, please. He's my husband, but it seems like there's a lot I don't know about him." The housekeeper sighed. 5 years ago, he was married to Mrs. Marina. They had a beautiful little boy, David. One night there was an accident." Her voice broke. "Mr. Montgomery was working late, as he always did. Mrs. Marina called, saying that David had a fever, asking him to come home, but he said he would finish just one more meeting." Izzy felt her heart clench. When he finally left the office, it was too late. They were coming back from the hospital when a semi-truck ran a red light. They died instantly. Tears began to run down Izzy's face. Now she understood the pain she saw in Gabriel's eyes, the way he looked at Michael, not only with tenderness, but with a deep anguish. "He blames himself," Maria continued. "He says that if he had gone home when she asked, they would be alive." That night, Izzy couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway and peeked through the slightly open door. Gabriel was walking towards the old nursery at the end of the hall, a room that he kept locked. She followed him silently and saw him standing at the door, just looking inside in the dark. Even from a distance, she could see his shoulders trembling. "Gabriel," she called softly. He turned around, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't wake me." She approached slowly. "Maria told me about Marina and David." Gabriel closed his eyes, as if the words were physical blows. "She shouldn't have. I'm sorry for your loss. You don't deserve your compassion," he said bitterly. "I killed them." "You didn't kill anyone, Gabriel. It was an accident. I should have been there." His voice rose, years of guilt finally exploding. "She called me Izzy, asked me to come home because our son was sick, and I said just one more hour. Always one more hour, one more meeting, one more important deal." Izzy came closer, seeing the agony in his face. "And is that why you helped me? Because you saw a chance to redeem yourself?" Gabriel looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a raw vulnerability. "When I saw you on the street, pregnant, alone, in danger, it was like time went back. This time, I could get there in time. This time, I could save someone." The confession hung between them in the dark hallway. Izzy felt something changing in her chest. Not just gratitude, but a deep connection with that man who carried so much weight on his shoulders. "Gabriel," she said softly, "you saved me. You saved Michael. That has to mean something." He looked at her as if she were a mirage. "How can you be so generous after everything you've been through?" "Because I recognize pain when I see it," she replied. "And because maybe we both need a second chance." For a moment, they stood there, in the silent hallway, two wounded souls recognizing each other. Gabriel raised his hand, almost touching her face, but stopped himself. "This is dangerous, Izzy," he whispered. "What?" "Starting to believe that we deserve happiness." Before she could answer, Michael's crying echoed from the room next door. The moment broke, but something fundamental had changed between them. As Izzy ran to take care of the baby, Gabriel remained in the hallway, looking at the locked room that he hadn't opened in 5 years. For the first time since his family's death, he wondered if he would be able to open that door again. 3 weeks had passed since Izzy had arrived at the mansion. Michael was stronger, but he still needed constant care. The domestic routine had created a dangerous intimacy between her and Gabriel. Small gestures, glances that lasted longer than necessary, conversations that stretched into the late hours. It was a rainy Thursday when everything changed. Gabriel was in his office when he received a call from Eleanor, her voice laced with malicious triumph. "Gabriel, I need to see you. Now, I've discovered some interesting things about your wife." "What are you talking about? Come to the office. I've brought some people you need to meet." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. Eleanor was plotting something. He asked James to take him downtown, leaving Izzy at home with Michael, who had a cold. In the company's office, Eleanor awaited him with a cruel smile, accompanied by a man Gabriel didn't recognize. Young, handsome, with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes. "Gabriel, this is Richard Allen," Eleanor announced triumphantly. "The real father of the baby you're raising." Gabriel's blood ran cold. Richard stood up, extending his hand with a cynical smile. "Nice to meet you, Gabriel. Or can I call you brother-in-law? What do you want?" Gabriel ignored the extended hand. "Simple." Richard sat down comfortably. "I want my son back, and my woman." Eleanor stepped forward, reveling in the drama. "It turns out, dear nephew, that Mr. Allen here is the son of important investors in the real estate sector. When he found out through reliable sources that his wife was living with you, he came to me. Imagine my surprise to discover that you two were never legally married." Gabriel kept a straight face, but inside he felt his world crumbling. "Go on." "Richard explained the whole situation to me," Eleanor continued, circling him like a predator. "He and Izzy had a falling out. She left the house impulsively, and when he went looking for her, he found out you had kidnapped her." "Kidnapped?" Gabriel stood up abruptly. "Easy." Richard raised his hands in false conciliation. "I know your intentions were good, but now that I'm financially stable and ready to take responsibility, I want my family back." Gabriel studied the man in front of him. There was something calculating in his eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with paternal or marital love. "If you wanted her so much, why did you abandon her pregnant?" Richard shrugged. "Temporary financial problems. Young people make mistakes when they're under pressure." The lie was obvious, but Gabriel realized that Eleanor had a bigger plan. "And what does this have to do with you, Eleanor?" "Simple. Richard is willing to be reasonable. He doesn't want to create a scandal or involve the press. He just wants his family. In exchange," she smiled venomously, "you marry Patricia Sterling next month, as always planned." Gabriel felt the trap closing. "And if I refuse? Then Richard will be forced to take legal action. Abandonment, kidnapping, coercion of a vulnerable woman. Imagine the headlines." Gabriel's cell phone rang. "Izzy," he answered immediately. "Gabriel?" Her voice was trembling, desperate. "Michael has a very high fever. I can't get it down. I need to take him to the hospital, but I don't know how to drive. And James isn't here." "I'm coming," he said immediately, already heading for the door. "Where are you going?" Eleanor shouted. "My son is sick." "He's not your son." Richard stood up. "He's mine. I'm going with you." Gabriel stopped at the door. "Don't even think about getting near him. I have legal rights. You have to get out of my way before I do something we'll both regret." Gabriel ran out, leaving Eleanor and Richard behind. Throughout the drive home, his heart beat erratically. Michael sick, Richard reappearing, Eleanor's trap closing, everything was falling apart. He found Izzy in the baby's room in complete panic. Michael was flushed with fever, crying inconsolably. "He was fine this morning," she sobbed. "Suddenly he started getting hot. He doesn't want to feed." Gabriel picked up the baby, feeling the heat radiating from the small body. "We're going to the hospital now." At the hospital, while Michael was being examined, Izzy collapsed into Gabriel's arms. "What if I lose him? I couldn't handle it." "You're not going to lose him," Gabriel said, hugging her tightly. "I promise you won't lose him." It was at that moment, with Izzy trembling in his arms, that Gabriel realized a devastating truth. He loved her. He loved that courageous woman who had entered his life like a hurricane, and he loved Michael as if he were truly his son. "Mr. Montgomery," the doctor approached. "The baby had a reaction to a new medication. We've controlled the fever, but he'll need to be kept under observation for 24 hours. As Izzy left to accompany Michael to the room, Gabriel stood alone in the hallway, processing the magnitude of his feelings. It was then that he saw Richard approaching, accompanied by 2 men in suits. "I've come to get my son," Richard announced, showing some papers. "I have documents here proving paternity and a request for temporary custody." "That's impossible. You can't." "I can. Isabella is my partner. They fled together after a marital spat. And now you are interfering in a family matter." Gabriel quickly read the documents. They were fake, he was sure, but they seemed legal enough to confuse hospital staff. "She's not going with you." "It's not your decision. Where is she?" At that moment, Izzy returned from the room and froze when she saw Richard. The blood drained from her face. "Hi, honey," Richard smiled coldly. "I've come to get you and our son." "No," she whispered, instinctively moving closer to Gabriel. "You abandoned me. You have no right." "I have every right. You're my woman, he's my son." Gabriel positioned himself between them. "She's not going anywhere with you." "Gabriel," Izzy touched his arm. "He's lying about something. We were never married. We never lived together officially." "It doesn't matter," Richard retorted. "We have a son together that gives me rights. And you," he pointed to Gabriel, "are nothing more than a rich stranger who took advantage of the situation." The tension in the hallway was palpable. Other patients and employees began to notice the discussion. "Mr. Montgomery," one of the men in suits stepped forward, "I recommend you cooperate. This can be resolved civilly." Gabriel looked at Izzy, seeing the terror in her eyes. Then he looked at the door to the room where Michael was sleeping, vulnerable and dependent. At that moment, he realized that there was only one way to protect them. "Richard," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "you have 3 seconds to leave this hospital before I call security and report that you are threatening a mother and a sick baby." "You can't stop me." "I can, because it turns out that Isabella and I have been legally married since yesterday." The silence that followed was absolute. Izzy looked at him in shock. Richard paled. "That's impossible." Gabriel pulled a marriage certificate from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. "Civil marriage performed yesterday, registered at the county clerk's office this morning. Isabella Sanders is now Isabella Montgomery, and Michael is legally my adopted son." The lie was so absurd that for a moment no one knew how to react. But Gabriel had learned that sometimes a bigger lie was needed to protect a precious truth. "You forged documents," Richard accused. "Prove it," Gabriel challenged. "Until then, I suggest you get out of my wife's and my son's hospital room." Richard left in a rage, but Gabriel knew that this was far from over. He had just declared war against Eleanor, against Richard, and against all the forces that wanted to destroy the family, that without realizing it, had become the most important thing in his life. When they were alone, Izzy stared at him with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Gabriel, what did you just do?" He looked at her, at that woman who had changed everything in his life and told the most dangerous truth he had ever uttered. "I just turned our lie into reality, and now there's no going back." The civil wedding took place 3 days later, in a cold and bureaucratic ceremony at the Cook County Courthouse. Only James and Maria served as witnesses. Izzy wore a simple light blue dress that Gabriel had bought, her hands trembling as she signed the papers that made the lie officially real. "Now we're really married," she murmured in the car, looking at the gold band on her finger. "It was the only way to protect you," Gabriel replied, but he avoided her gaze. The truth was more complicated. He had married her because the idea of losing her to Richard was unbearable. Back at the mansion, they tried to maintain normalcy, but everything had changed. The weight of the real marriage hung between them like a ghost. During dinner, their conversations were punctuated by awkward silences. When their hands touched accidentally, an electric current ran through them. "Gabriel," Izzy said on the third night after the wedding, "we need to talk about this." They were in the living room, Michael sleeping between them in the bassinet. The scene was so domestic, so perfect, that it hurt. "About what? About us? About what this means?" Gabriel got up, walking to the window. "It means you're protected. That's what matters." "And you? What are you protected from?" The question hit him hard. From loneliness, from guilt, from an empty, meaningless life. "Don't worry about me." "How can I not worry?" Izzy approached, her voice soft but determined. "Gabriel, you sacrificed your freedom for us. Your aunt must be furious. Your business could be affected." "My business has survived worse things." "What about Eleanor?" Gabriel laughed bitterly. "Eleanor is planning my destruction as we speak." As if she had been summoned, Gabriel's cell phone rang. "Eleanor." He looked at Izzy and answered on speakerphone. "Congratulations on the wedding, dear nephew." Eleanor's voice dripped with venom. "What an intimate ceremony. How did you find out?" "I have my methods. And I also have some interesting information I'd like to share with you." Gabriel felt his stomach clench. "What information?" "About your lovely wife's past. It seems little Izzy hasn't been entirely honest with you." Izzy paled, grabbing Gabriel's arm. "Go on," Gabriel said, keeping his voice steady. "It turns out our Isabella has an interesting record. 2 years ago, she was arrested for shoplifting at Macy's, probation for 6 months. And a few months ago, she was fired not because of the pregnancy, but for suspected embezzlement from the store's cash register." "That's a lie," Izzy shouted. "Ah, she's listening. Good. Honey, I have copies of all the documents here. Police report, criminal record, HR reports from the store, all very official." Gabriel looked at Izzy, who had turned white as a sheet. "Izzy? Gabriel, I can explain." "Oh, you really can," Eleanor continued. "Tell him about the shoplifting, darling. Diapers and formula that you stole when you were 2 months pregnant and starving because Richard had run off with the rent money." Tears began to stream down Izzy's face. "Gabriel, and the firing? Tell him about how you took $100 from the register to buy nausea medication because you didn't have health insurance. How you returned it the next day, but it was too late." Gabriel felt like the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. Izzy had hidden this from him. After everything they had shared, she hadn't trusted him enough to tell the truth. "I'll give you 24 hours to annul this ridiculous marriage," Eleanor continued. "Or this information goes to the press. Imagine the headlines. Tech mogul marries con artist with criminal record. Your investors will love it." The call ended. The silence in the room was deafening. "Gabriel," Izzy whispered, "let me explain. You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. It's the same thing." Gabriel moved away from her, the pain in his voice cutting like a blade. "After everything we've shared, you didn't trust me. How could I tell you? You had already done so much for me. How could I admit that I'm a criminal?" "You're not a criminal," Gabriel exploded. "You were desperate, pregnant, abandoned. Anyone would do the same. So, you understand?" Gabriel closed his eyes, fighting against the conflicting emotions. "I understand your actions. I don't understand why you hid it from me. Because I was afraid you'd judge me, that you'd send me away. And now?" Gabriel turned to her, his blue eyes full of pain. Now Eleanor has a weapon against us, against the company I built, against the employees who depend on me. The phone rang again. This time it was James. "Mr. Montgomery, there's some strange activity outside. Press cars, photographers. I think they found out about the wedding." Gabriel ran to the window. Outside the gates of the mansion, a small crowd of journalists was gathered, cameras and microphones ready. "Damn it!" "Gabriel," Izzy approached, "I'm leaving. I'll take Michael and get out of your life. I can't let them destroy everything you've built." "Don't be ridiculous. Where are you going to go? How are you going to support yourself?" "I don't know, but—" "Daddy! Daddy!" They turned around, surprised. Michael had woken up and was reaching his little arms out to Gabriel, babbling his first words. The impact was devastating. That baby, who didn't carry his blood, was calling him Dad. Gabriel picked up Michael, feeling his heart break. He said Daddy. His first word, Izzy whispered, tears running down her face. "He loves you, Gabriel. You're the only father he knows." At that moment, looking at the baby in his arms and at the woman he had learned to love, Gabriel made a decision that would change everything. "No one is going anywhere," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We're a family, legally, officially, and in what matters most, in the heart. But Eleanor doesn't know who she's messing with." Gabriel kissed Michael's forehead and looked into Izzy's eyes. "Do you trust me? With my life? Then we'll face this together." But even as he spoke, Gabriel knew that Eleanor was just getting started. Outside, the flashes of cameras lit up the night, and he could feel that a storm was brewing. A storm that would test not only their marriage of convenience, but the real feelings that had grown between them. The phone rang a third time. It wasn't Eleanor. It was an unknown number. "Gabriel Montgomery, yes. This is Mark Roberts from Scandal magazine. We have some questions about your surprise wedding to a woman who has a criminal record. Would you care to comment?" Gabriel hung up, but the phone immediately rang again. Another journalist, then another. "Turn everything off," he said to Izzy. "We're not answering any more calls today." But when they went to sleep that night, Gabriel knew they would wake up to a different world. The headlines were already being written, social media starting to boil, and Eleanor was just waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. Lying in bed, listening to Izzy breathing in the next room, Gabriel wondered if the love he felt for her would be strong enough to survive what was coming. Because Eleanor wasn't just attacking his marriage, she was attacking the only chance of happiness he had found in 5 years. And Gabriel had a terrible feeling that the worst was yet to come. The headline in the Chicago Tribune the next morning was devastating. "Tech mogul marries woman with criminal record." The photo occupied half a page. Gabriel leaving the hospital with Izzy in his arms, both looking intimate and in love. Gabriel read the article on his tablet while having coffee, his hands trembling slightly. The article spared no details. The shoplifting, the dismissal for embezzlement, the suspicious pregnancy, and speculation about the real motives behind the whirlwind wedding. "How did they get so many details?" Izzy asked, reading over his shoulder. She was pale, Michael asleep in her arms. "Eleanor has contacts in the press that go back decades," Gabriel muttered, "and enough money to buy any information." The landline rang incessantly. James had disconnected the intercom because the journalists kept trying to talk to them. Outside, the crowd of reporters had tripled overnight. "Mr. Montgomery," Maria appeared at the kitchen door, agitated. "There's someone from the IRS at the door. They want to examine your tax documents from the last 5 years. Gabriel closed his eyes. Eleanor was attacking on all fronts. "And there's more," Maria continued. "A summons arrived from the district attorney's office. They want to investigate whether there was any irregularity in your marriage." "What kind of irregularity?" Izzy asked. "Marriage of convenience, false statements, exploitation of a vulnerable person." Gabriel read the document that Maria brought. "Eleanor is suggesting that I took advantage of your desperate situation." Izzy sat heavily in a chair. "My God, what have we done?" Before Gabriel could answer, James ran in. "Sir, there's a bigger problem. Richard Allen is giving an interview on TV, live." They rushed to the living room where the television showed Richard, impeccably dressed, sitting in the studio of a morning show. "Oh, it was a shock to discover that my partner and my son were being held against their will by this man," Richard was saying, his voice filled with false pain. "Isabella was a vulnerable woman, pregnant with financial problems. Gabriel Montgomery took advantage of that vulnerability." "He's lying," Izzy shouted at the TV. "But do you confirm that you are the biological father of the child?" asked the host. "I confirm. I have the DNA test here." Richard showed some papers. "Michael Allen is my son, and I'm fighting in court to get him back." Gabriel felt his world collapsing. How did he get genetic material for a DNA test? The answer came when his cell phone beeped with a message from Eleanor. "Northwestern Memorial Hospital keeps blood samples for 30 days. How lucky that Richard knows people there. He bribed someone at the hospital to get Michael's blood," Gabriel said, showing the message to Izzy. On TV, Richard continued his performance. "Isabella is a good mother, but she was manipulated by a powerful man who used money and influence to separate her from me. I just want my family back." Gabriel's phone rang. It was Sterling, chairman of the board of directors of the company. "Gabriel, we need to talk, now." "It's not a good time. It's not a request. The shareholders are in a panic. The stock price has fallen 30% since this morning. If you don't resolve this today, we'll have to consider your temporary replacement." Gabriel hung up, feeling the noose tightening. In a matter of hours, Eleanor had orchestrated a coordinated attack on all fronts: personal, legal, financial, and professional. "Gabriel," Izzy touched his arm, "I need to tell you something." "What else?" "This morning I received a call. It was a lawyer for Richard. He offered a deal." Gabriel turned to her, a chill running down his spine. "What kind of deal?" "If I leave voluntarily with Michael and publicly admit that you coerced me into the marriage, he won't ask for child support and will let me raise Michael." Her tears began to fall. "But if I stay, he'll fight for full custody, and he said he has evidence that I'm an unfit mother." "What evidence?" "The arrests, the shoplifting charges. He says no judge would give custody of a child to a woman with my record, especially if I'm involved in a fraudulent marriage." Gabriel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "And are you considering it?" Izzy looked at Michael, then at Gabriel, her tears falling freely. "I'm destroying your life, your company, your reputation, everything you've built." "That doesn't answer my question." "Gabriel," she whispered, "maybe he's right. Maybe I'm unfit to be a mother. Fit women don't steal food, don't lose jobs, don't get involved with married men. You weren't involved with me when you met Richard. But I am now." She looked him in the eyes. "And it's destroying you." Before Gabriel could answer, James appeared again, this time visibly shaken. "Sir, Eleanor Montgomery is here, with a legal team and a U.S. Marshal." Gabriel and Izzy exchanged glances. This was the end. Eleanor entered the room like a general conquering enemy territory, followed by 3 lawyers in black suits and a plump marshal with a folder of documents. "Gabriel," she said with a cold smile, "I've come to find a civilized resolution to this embarrassing situation. Get out of my house." "Technically, it's not just your house anymore," one of the lawyers stepped forward. "We have a court order freezing all of Mr. Gabriel Montgomery's assets while we investigate the legality of his recent actions." Gabriel took the document, his eyes quickly scanning the pages. Account freeze, investigation for coercion, suspicion of making false statements. "You can't do this." "We can and we did," Eleanor retorted. Unless what?" Eleanor approached Izzy, who instinctively clutched Michael tighter to her chest. Unless Ms. Isabella publicly admits that she was coerced into the marriage, signs the annulment papers, and hands the child over to the biological father for proper care. Never, Izzy said, but her voice trembled. Oh, but you will, Eleanor smiled cruelly. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you lose custody of the baby anyway, and Gabriel will lose the company, and you both may face criminal charges. The U.S. Marshal stepped forward. Ms. Sanders. Excuse me, Ms. Montgomery, I need to inform you that there is a warrant for the seizure of the child Michael Allen. The biological father alleges abandonment and coercion. No, Izzy whispered, recoiling. The choice is yours, Eleanor said. Leave voluntarily now. Admit it was all a mistake, and you can visit your son on weekends, or fight in court and lose everything, your son, your freedom, and destroy Gabriel in the process. Gabriel saw Izzy looking at him, then at Michael, then back at him again. He saw the exact moment she made the decision that would shatter them both. I'll go, she said, her voice breaking. I'll leave. Izzy, no, Gabriel. She turned to him, tears running freely. I love you. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone, but I can't destroy your life, and I can't risk losing Michael forever. We can fight. With what weapons? She cried. Look at me. I'm a woman with a criminal record, no family, no money, nothing. And you have everything to lose and nothing to gain by staying with me. I have you. I have Michael. That's everything. Izzy closed her eyes as if the words were daggers. It's not enough. She kissed Gabriel one last time, a desperate kiss full of love and farewell. Then she handed Michael to him. Take care of him while I pack my things, she whispered. I can't take him now. I can't. Gabriel held Michael, feeling the baby clutch at his shirt, as if he knew something terrible was happening. When Izzy came down with a small suitcase 20 minutes later, Gabriel tried one last time. Izzy, please, don't do this. We can find a way. I already have, she said, unable to look at him. I'm going to give an interview taking all the blame. I'll say I invented the story of the abandoned pregnancy to get money, that the wedding was my idea. That should clear your name. And lie about everything we've lived through? Izzy finally looked at him, and Gabriel saw that something inside her had broken irreparably. Maybe it was all a lie, she said. Maybe people like me don't deserve happy endings. She left without looking back, taking with her Gabriel's heart and leaving only the echo of a promise of love that had lasted just long enough to show him what he had lost. Michael began to cry in Gabriel's arms, as if he knew that his mother had just disappeared from their lives. Eleanor smiled triumphantly. What unnecessary drama, but at least now we can get back to normal. Gabriel looked at her with a pure hatred that made her recoil. Get out of my house, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Now. Gabriel, be reasonable. Get out. When he was finally alone with Michael, Gabriel collapsed on the sofa, the baby crying inconsolably in his arms. Outside, he could hear the shouts of the journalists as Izzy left through the back of the property. Everything was lost. Izzy was gone, Michael would be taken soon, his company was in ruins, and he was back to the same emptiness that had consumed him for the last 5 years. Only now it was worse, because now he knew exactly what he had lost. 3 weeks passed like a nightmare. Gabriel watched helplessly as Izzy gave the television interview, taking all the blame for the fraudulent marriage and clearing him of any coercion. Her words were like daggers. I invented the story of the abandonment to arouse his compassion. Gabriel Montgomery is an honorable man who was deceived by a desperate woman. The interview worked. The company's shares stabilized, the investigations were dropped, and the press began to portray him as a victim of a con artist. But Gabriel felt emptier every day. Michael had been handed over to Richard a week after Izzy left. The moment they took the baby from his arms was the second worst day of his life, second only to the accident that killed Marina and David. Michael cried, reaching his little arms out to Gabriel, and that image haunted him every night. Now Gabriel walked through the silent mansion like a ghost. He couldn't work. He couldn't eat. He couldn't do anything but think about Izzy and Michael. It was Maria who brought the first clue that something was wrong. "Mr. Montgomery," she said one morning, hesitant, "I received a strange call yesterday." "From who?" "From a woman who said she was Izzy's sister. She was looking for her. She seemed desperate." Gabriel looked up for the first time in days. "Izzy has no family. She told me she was rejected by her parents." "That's what I found strange. The woman, Carla, said that her parents died in an accident 2 years ago, that she went to live with an aunt in West Virginia after that and lost contact with Izzy." Gabriel's heart began to beat faster. "Do you have her phone number?" "I do. She left it in case Ms. Izzy showed up." Gabriel called immediately. Carla Sanders answered on the second ring. "Hello? Carla, this is Gabriel Montgomery. Maria, my housekeeper, said you called looking for Izzy." "Gabriel Montgomery, the businessman? What? How do you know my sister?" "It's a long story. Can you come to Chicago? I need to talk to you in person." Carla arrived the next day, a 22-year-old woman with features similar to Izzy's, but younger and visibly worried. Gabriel received her in his home office. "I don't understand," she said after Gabriel told her the whole story. "Izzy told me about our parents. They died in a car accident 2 years ago, it's true, but they never rejected her. They adored Izzy. Then why did she make up this story?" "I don't know. After the funeral, Izzy became very depressed. She said she needed some time alone, that she was going to Chicago to try a new life. I came to live with our aunt in Charleston, but we always kept in touch. Until 6 months ago." "What happened 6 months ago?" "She stopped answering my calls. The last messages she sent said she was fine, that she had met someone special, but that she needed some time. I thought it was a new boyfriend thing." Gabriel did some mental calculations. 6 months ago was when Izzy had met Richard. "Carla, I need to show you some things, but first tell me about Izzy. What was she like before she came to Chicago?" "Izzy?" Carla smiled for the first time. "She was the most honest person I knew. She worked as a teacher in a public school. She loved children. After our parents died, she used all the inheritance to pay off their debts, and there was still a little left. She gave me that money so I could go to college. So she wasn't poor when she came to Chicago. No, she wasn't rich, but she had some savings, and she would never steal anything. Never. Izzy would rather starve than steal." Gabriel felt something cold run down his spine. He showed Carla the news reports about Izzy's arrests, the shoplifting, the dismissal. Carla turned pale. This can't be true. It has to be a mistake, or what? Or someone forged those documents." Gabriel hired the best private investigator in Chicago, a former FBI agent named Brian Collins. Within 48 hours, Brian brought information that changed everything. "The documents are fake," Brian announced, spreading papers on the desk in Gabriel's office. "Very well done, but fake. The shoplifting never happened. I checked with Macy's, with the police station, with the court. There is no record of it." "And the dismissal?" "Isabella Sanders did work at the fashion center store for 3 months. She was fired, yes, but not for embezzlement. She was fired because the manager, a guy named Mike Olson, tried to sexually harass her, and she reported him to HR." Gabriel clenched his fists. "So everything was made up?" "Not only made up, but very well orchestrated. And this is where it gets interesting." Brian pulled out another document. Mike Olson received $50,000 in his bank account 3 days before the first report about Izzy came out in the press. Payment made by a shell corporation registered in the name of Eleanor Montgomery. Eleanor bribed the manager to lie about Izzy. More than that, Eleanor created an entire criminal past for her. False documents, bought witnesses, even forged hospital records. Gabriel stood up, starting to walk around the office. "But why? Why do this to an innocent person?" "Because Izzy was the weak point in her plan. If you were really in love with an honest and worthy woman, it would be much harder to get you to give up. But if she was a con artist, it would be easier to convince me to abandon her." Gabriel stopped, a terrible realization hitting him. "Brian, investigate Richard Allen. I want to know everything about him. I've already started, and you're not going to like what I found." Brian pulled out a thicker folder. "Richard Allen is not the son of real estate investors. He's a professional con man. In the last 5 years, he's scammed at least 8 wealthy women in different cities. Always the same pattern: conquest, pregnancy, then he disappears with their money. And Izzy? Izzy was different. She wasn't rich, so there was no money to steal. But when he found out she was really pregnant, he saw a different opportunity." Gabriel felt nauseous. "What opportunity?" "Blackmail. He found out about you through the newspapers when the first photos of you leaving the hospital appeared. Richard realized he had caught a much bigger fish than he imagined. He contacted Eleanor, and they made a deal." "What deal?" "Richard would pretend to want Izzy and Michael back. Eleanor would use that to force you to marry Patricia Sterling. In exchange, Richard would receive $2 million and disappear from Izzy's life forever." Gabriel sat down heavily. "And Michael?" "Richard doesn't want Michael, never did. In fact," Brian hesitated, "I have evidence that Richard isn't even the biological father of the child." "What are you saying?" "The DNA test was falsified. Richard bribed a technician at the lab, but I got a real sample of Michael's blood from the hospital and compared it with Richard's samples that I obtained secretly. There is no genetic compatibility." Gabriel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Then who is Michael's father?" "Good question, but I can tell you who it isn't: Richard Allen." Gabriel was silent for several minutes, processing all the information. Izzy was innocent. She had been the victim of an elaborate conspiracy between Eleanor and Richard, and Michael wasn't Richard's son. "Brian, where is Izzy now? That's the most worrying part. No one has seen her since she gave that interview. She simply disappeared. And Michael, he's with Richard, officially. But I have information that Richard hardly spends any time with the child. A nanny takes care of him full-time, and Richard only shows up when there are photographers around." Gabriel stood up, a steely determination taking hold of him. "Brian, I need all the evidence you've collected: documents, recordings, witnesses, everything. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to destroy Eleanor and Richard, and I'm going to bring Izzy and Michael back home. It's not going to be easy. Eleanor has a lot of power, a lot of connections." "And I have the truth," Gabriel interrupted him. "And 5 years of anger saved up against the woman who has always tried to control my life." He looked out the window, seeing the city stretching into the distance. Somewhere out there, Izzy was alone, probably blaming herself for all the tragedy. And Michael was being cared for by a man who not only wasn't his father, but didn't care about him. Gabriel had lost one family 5 years ago by working too much and arriving too late. He wouldn't lose another by allowing lies and manipulations to destroy true love. The war was just beginning. Gabriel called a press conference for the next morning. When Eleanor found out, she called furiously. "What do you think you're doing?" "Telling the truth," Gabriel replied calmly. "About you, about Richard, about everything. You have no proof. I have all the proof I need. And more, I found Izzy. The lie worked." Eleanor was silent for a few seconds before hanging up. Gabriel knew she was desperate, which would make her reckless. In fact, he hadn't found Izzy yet, but Brian had a lead. A woman matching her description had been seen at a homeless shelter in Evanston volunteering. Gabriel prayed it was her. The press conference took place in the company auditorium, packed with journalists. Gabriel took the stage with a folder of documents and Brian by his side. 3 weeks ago, an innocent woman was publicly defamed to protect the interests of greedy and unscrupulous people. Gabriel began. "Today, I have come to restore Isabella Sanders' honor and expose the truth about the conspiracy that almost destroyed my family." He methodically presented all the evidence: the forged documents, the bought witnesses, Eleanor's payments to Richard, the falsity of the DNA test. With each revelation, the journalists became more agitated. "Richard Allen is not the father of Michael Santos," Gabriel declared. "He is a professional conman who, along with my aunt Eleanor Montgomery, orchestrated a plan to blackmail me and force a marriage of convenience." In the back of the auditorium, Eleanor appeared with her lawyers, her face distorted with anger. She tried to approach the stage, but Gabriel continued. "Isabella Sanders is an honorable woman, a dedicated teacher who has never committed any crime. She was the victim of a cruel conspiracy that forced her to lie to protect me and the baby she raised as her son." "That's all a lie," Eleanor shouted from the back of the auditorium. "Gabriel, you're destroying our family because of a con artist." "The only con artist here is you, Eleanor," Gabriel replied, his voice echoing through the microphone. "And I have proof of everything." It was then that the doors of the auditorium opened again. Richard ran in, visibly panicked, carrying Michael in his arms. The baby was crying desperately. "Gabriel!" Richard shouted. "I need to talk to you. It's about the baby." Everyone turned to look. Richard looked desperate, his hair disheveled, his clothes rumpled. "What happened?" Gabriel descended from the stage immediately. "He's sick. He's had a fever for 2 days and won't stop crying. I don't know what to do." Richard extended Michael to Gabriel. "Please, you know how to take care of him." Gabriel took Michael in his arms, immediately feeling the baby's fever. The little one stopped crying as soon as he recognized Gabriel, clinging to his shirt in desperation. "Didn't you take him to the doctor?" Gabriel asked, incredulous. "I tried, but he only gets worse when I'm around. He won't stop crying. He doesn't want to eat." Richard was on the verge of tears. "I don't know how to be a father. I never wanted to be a father." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Cameras captured every moment of the confession. "Richard," Gabriel said calmly, "where is his mother?" I don't know. She disappeared after the interview. I tried to find her, but..." "Why did you try to find her? I thought you were a couple." Richard looked around, realizing that he was being filmed, that he had fallen into a trap. We're not..." "I tell the truth," Gabriel pressed. "Did you know Isabella before I found her on the street?" "Yes," Richard broke down. "I met her 6 months ago, but it wasn't anything serious. She got pregnant and I ran away. I didn't want responsibility." "And why did you come back?" Richard looked at Eleanor, who was making desperate gestures for him to shut up. "Eleanor offered me money," he confessed. $2 million to pretend I wanted Isabella back, to force you to separate." The auditorium exploded in murmurs. Gabriel turned to the cameras. "Are you hearing this? Eleanor Montgomery bribed this man to destroy my marriage and separate a mother from her son." "Gabriel, stop this!" Eleanor approached the stage. "You're making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," Gabriel replied, "and allowing your lies to drive away the woman I love." It was then that another voice echoed from the back of the auditorium. "Gabriel?" Everyone turned. Izzy was at the door, pale, thin, but alive. Carla was by her side, having finally managed to find her at the shelter. "Izzy!" Gabriel ran to her, still carrying Michael. When Izzy saw Michael, her tears began to fall. "My baby! How is he?" "He's got a fever, but he'll be fine now that you're here," Gabriel said, handing Michael to her. The baby immediately calmed down in his mother's arms, stopping crying and snuggling against her. "I'm so sorry," Izzy whispered to Gabriel, "for everything, for lying in the interview, for leaving." "You have nothing to apologize for," Gabriel said, touching her face gently. "I know the truth about everything, about the forged documents, about Eleanor and Richard, about the lies." Izzy looked at him in disbelief. "You know?" "I know you're innocent. I know you were the victim of a conspiracy, and I know that I love you more than anything in this world." On stage, Eleanor watched the scene with growing horror. Her lawyers were discreetly pulling her towards the exit, realizing that the situation was lost. "Gabriel," Izzy said, her voice choked with emotion, "do you still want me? After everything?" "I want you for the rest of my life," he replied, kneeling right there in front of all the journalists. "Isabella Sanders, will you marry me for real this time? For love, not for need?" Izzy looked at him, at Michael in her arms, at all the cameras recording the moment. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I do." Gabriel stood up and kissed her, a kiss that was broadcast live to the entire country. Michael, still feverish but finally calm, remained safe between them. 6 months later, the church was decorated with white and gold flowers. This time, the wedding was a real celebration, with Carla as the maid of honor, James as the best man, and Michael, now a healthy and smiling baby, in Maria's arms during the ceremony. Eleanor was convicted of conspiracy, forgery, and defamation, serving 2 years in prison. Richard, in exchange for his cooperation with the justice system, received a lighter sentence, but had to return all the money he received from Eleanor. Gabriel discovered, through more detailed tests, that Michael had been conceived on a night when Izzy, depressed by the death of her parents and vulnerable, had been practically coerced by Richard. The DNA test confirmed that Richard was indeed the biological father, but he signed a voluntary relinquishment of paternity, admitting that he never wanted to be a father. Gabriel officially adopted Michael on the same day as the wedding. "I love you," Izzy whispered to Gabriel during the party, watching Michael play with the other children in the mansion's garden. "I love you more," Gabriel replied, pulling her closer, "and I promise that this time when you or Michael need me, I'll always be here." Izzy smiled, touching his face. "You already were, Gabriel. Since the first night, when you found me in the rain, you were already here." They danced until late, a family finally complete, knowing that they had overcome all the lies and obstacles. Love had won, not just because it was strong, but because it was true. And in the mansion that was once silent and empty, now echoed children's laughter and the sound of a family that refused to be destroyed by the darkness of the past, choosing instead to build a bright future together. Michael took his first steps in the garden of that house, always towards the man he chose to be his father and the woman who never gave up loving him. And Gabriel, who once lost a family for arriving too late, learned that sometimes love gives us a second chance, and this time he arrived just in time.